Welcome. My name is Elise Patterson. For a self-description, I'm a young black woman with braids wearing a floral top with a necktie, surrounded in my home by diverse art, a globe, and family quilt. I'm the founder, executive, and artistic director of Abilities Dance Boston. We are a dance company that promotes disability justice in Greater Boston and beyond through our performances, dance education, lectures, advocacy, and more. I am so thrilled to be with you to present Branches, our summer virtual show series that allows ADB dancers to be choreographers and work with both ADB core members and new dancers to bring to life themes that resonate with them at the intersections of climate justice and disability justice. These choreographers stepped into my role a bit with their studious research, movement creation process, adapting their practice to different body minds in the room, working with their fantastic composer, Erin Rogers, to match the music with the movements and writing the narrative audio descriptions that complements and uplifts the story they're telling. All of this was done from their homes. To reduce our company footprint, as well as acknowledge as a community that while the pandemic continues and some aren't able to resume being in work or audience, for our immunocompromised friends, we are highlighting that we are able to do work safely and high quality from our homes. While it's not neutral because of the increased energy from our devices, it is a step in envisioning what intersectional equity work can look like. With these themes of climate change and emergency response, and in our last piece, reproductive justice, we acknowledge these topics can be triggering and encourage you to skip and watch at a later time as so needed. I want to further highlight Erin Rogers, who completed all of the music you will experience, Amber Pearcy, our audio descriptions editor, who worked with our choreographers in ensuring that they further developed their access artistry skills, and our ADB administrative team, for making the overall process as smooth as possible. Each choreographer will give a brief intro before their piece to further contextualize the themes and process. Thank you to all the dancers for contributing your skills in a great space. Acknowledging too that we can further use your support in ensuring that we can continue to offer free tickets to both this and future performances, check out abilitiesdanceboston.org/donate to support our work, as well as joining our newsletter and platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Abilities Dance Boston. With that, we encourage you to enjoy the show. Thank you to Liberty Mutual Foundation for supporting this work.
Hi, my name is Louisa, and I'm currently located in the Bay Area, California, but I'm originally from the East Coast, where I still teach and perform whenever possible. I've been working with Abilities Dance Boston since 2018. Growing up in Vermont, I always felt a connection and appreciation for nature. In beginning the creation of this process, I was reminded of a piece by Morgan Harper Nichols, a neurodivergent writer and artist, in which she speaks about wildflowers and diversity. Revisiting this piece led me to explore the book 8 Master Lessons from Nature by Gary Ferguson, diving deeper into themes of community support and interdependence. You will hear some sections from these writings throughout the audio descriptions of this piece. What I found really interesting in this research process was how elements of nature, trees, and flowers communicate with each other, adapt, and support one another in times of need, not unlike human beings. As a disabled artist, finding support and representation in the disability community has been essential to my growth and survival. During this process, I worked collaboratively with the dancers, incorporating their individual movements, phrase work, and ideas, weaving them together. This piece is a celebration of diversity, disability, and community. Thank you. Four dancers wearing brightly colored tops move in solitude from separate Zoom screens in their homes. They gently shake their hands next to their heads as if they were trees, shaking pine needles from their branches. Sending out a signal for support, they gradually come together. If you ever happen to see a field of wildflowers containing more than one species, there's a reason for that. In unison, they raise their arms, leaves swaying in the wind. Lowering and folding their arms crossed over their torsos, they extend their arms once more, expanding and reaching to the sides of their spaces. They trace right to left, folding and unfolding, leaning forward, gently coming close to the screen. They bring their hands together as if holding something with great care. They slide back, one arm extended, palm flexed, tracing their torso, back and forward again until the hands meet. Both hands rotate and unwind as they lower, releasing what they held. Continuing to move in unison to the back of one hand slides from cheek to forehead across their mouths, reaching out into the space. They rebound, dropping the extended arm as they bend to the side, circle the torso, and come to neutral. Support. Everyone leans to the side as if they are wildflowers, bending in the wind, their roots grounding them. Interdependence. Upper limbs extend in all directions, a flurry of branches and roots. They find unison with one arm extended, reaching out on the diagonal, the opposite arm tracing along the extended limb, moving from shoulder to fingertips. They twist and unwind, moving back to the center. Community. Both arms release upward, hands clasp as they lower. Crumbling. They throw their arms, reaching forward and recoil back as they bend and fold their bodies, breaking like stones shattering. Recover. They rotate from high to low, returning to an upright stance facing away. Resilient. Slowly they rotate to face the front again. Linda and Mallory travel in a circle, ending on the diagonal. Kate and Vanessa mirror their path, sweeping an arm through space. In unison, they reach both arms forward on the diagonal and rebound into a swing. Each flower has different survival strategies, and as a result, they are able to keep the ecosystem going, surviving through harsh conditions to give other flowers time to recover. They continue to swing and slice the space, shattering the unison, building the intensity, until finally they come to rest, arms lifted, elbows bent in a moment of stillness. Vanessa and Mallory begin to circle their arms gently, beckoning their community. After 2 circles, Kate and Linda join in, following the movement in canon. One arm sweeps overhead in an arch. The torso follows, curving to complete the circle. They roll their shoulders forward and back, alternating sides. Their arms slice the space in front of them, alternating one on top of the other as they cross, lifting higher each time. Vanessa and Mallory press their arms down, hands stacked as they lower. Kate and Linda follow in canon. One arm lifts and sweeps from the back to the front. The other arm follows, sweeping horizontally as if tracing the horizon. One hand ripples like a wave as they trace back across the horizon. They lift and lower one hand, rising and falling like the tide. The movement is staggered, but connected through breath and the strength of community. They lift and sweep an arm from the back to the front once more, stacking the hands and lowering them. They move one arm at a time, lifting them to the side, elbows bent. They turn their heads, looking to one side and then the other, shifting their gaze in an arch, following the space between their lifted hands. They expand, taking up space as they extend their arms, reaching to the sides of their screens. Their torsos ripple slightly back to front and their hands clasp. Vanessa and Mallory hold while Linda and Kate complete the canon. They join together and repeat, expanding and reaching their arms, open and close. They come close to the screen and bring their hands together, once again holding something with great care. They rise and lower, cutting through the space in unison. Each dancer moves in their own way, but remains connected to their community. They travel together to the same point, shifting on the diagonal, slicing across the space, reach, expand, recover, connect. There is strength in diversity and power in community that connects them. They melt and shift away until they are off screen and only the edges of their limbs remain reaching into the space. They slide and rotate, re-entering the space. Extend one arm forward, palm flex, close to the camera. They trace their torso with the other limb back and forward until the hands meet. Both hands rotate and unwind as they lower, releasing what they held. They extend their arms once more, expanding, reaching to the sides of their spaces. They trace right to left, unfolding and folding one upper limb, circle the torso with arms reaching. Vanessa and Kate circle the space, rotating, with one arm leading them. Mallory and Linda follow their path, tracing the space with one arm. They meet and move in unison, sweeping the other arm across the horizon. They lift their arms once more, elbows bent, gently circling their arms as if beckoning their community. Each wildflower has its own strength, and together they create diversity in the landscape. Some have deeper roots to help them survive during the drought, and others have waxy leaves to contain moisture. 4 dancers move in unison from separate Zoom screens in their homes, dressed in brightly colored tops. In unison, they shake their hands next to their heads as if they were trees shaking pine needles from their branches, repeating the movement one by one as they come to a stillness. We cannot survive without each other and the diversity of our strengths. We learn from the wildflowers that we belong to each other and our strengths support one another. In diversity, there is beauty and there is strength.
Hello, my name is Carmen Rizzo. I am one of the choreographers for Branches, the show that you're currently watching, and I use she, her pronouns. I am a Latin American woman with light tan skin and dark curly hair. I am sitting in front of white doors and I'm wearing a blue spaghetti strap tank top. My choreography, which you're about to experience, shines a light on the very devastating floods that happened in the south of Brazil recently. Brazil is my home country, so it does hold a special place in my heart, and I try to bring it with me to all my work as much as possible, so this was a great opportunity to do that. I also wanted to take this opportunity to remind us and kind of bring to the forefront the awareness of how the environmental crisis is really a human rights crisis as well, with a special consideration to the people with disabilities, and how in reality we live in a much larger context than we tend to notice or realize. We indeed do not fall out of a coconut tree, and although many times in our lives we do have to have a more internal and individualized focus to get to the next thing or to do the next task or to complete the next goal, I also think it's important to remind ourselves that we live in a much larger system. When reading about the floods in Brazil, I was reminded about how global of an issue this is, as are many other natural disasters that are catalyzed by human behavior. Although it can be overwhelming to think about how something that happens across the globe can affect you, I think it's also super empowering to flip that narrative and to think about how your positive actions can affect people and ecosystems in a different hemisphere as well. Fully acknowledging that it shouldn't be only on individuals to make the positive impact and to make the positive change, and there should be a larger governmental and institutionalized effort on that front. In my research, I also read many stories about people who lost so much and really almost everything, And somehow the common thread amongst those people was really maintaining hope. Although they lost everything, they haven't lost hope. And it is really common in Brazilian culture to get through the worst times with smiles and music and dance and a lot of hope through community. So I did want to bring that into my work as well. Through the research process with the dancers, I brought all the material to them. I made it accessible to them if they would like to dive in. As a dancer myself, I like to have access to information that will feed into my creative work within a choreographer's development, so I tried to support my artists in that as well. And we had discussions about how each individual dancer could relate to what was happening, even though they weren't there, they weren't a part of what happened. And I think that truly giving each artist that autonomy and personal connection to the work allows them to perform at their best and therefore allow others to connect to their work. So it's not as interesting or important to me to have dancers replicate something that I created in a vision that I had. My vision actually includes individuality, and I wanted to bring each dancer's perspective into my work. So we did work very collaboratively in this process. I did give them material to chew on. I did offer them phrase work that you will see sometimes in unison, sometimes broken into different pieces in syncopated ways. But the idea is that even in this situation in which everyone in the south of Brazil that went through this situation of the flood, they have their own backgrounds and their own experiences, and even though they were all immersed in the same circumstance, they didn't go through the same exact process. So I wanted to highlight that in my work, as well as the exploration of textures of water and the feeling of being flooded, and what does it mean to be flooded inside, what does it mean to be flooded from the outside, what does it mean to have support physically, mentally, emotionally. It really stood out to me in the stories that I read about the flood in Brazil, how it really was the community members who stuck out for each other and really allowed each other to survive and to get together and get out of the situation together. So I just wanted to bring that and to remind us all that there's hope out there no matter what. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope that shines a light inside of you to make change however you can. Enjoy.
Due to extenuating circumstances, we were unable to.
Cassandra, Shai, Linda, Kim, and Demi, in open spaces of their homes, face their cameras. They are wearing flowy clothes in different shades of blue. They each hug one arm in and then the other, as if trying to collect themselves, their resources, and their community, and being unable to do so. In an unsynchronized mix of arms pulling and pushing, all 5 dancers embody the loss that comes with flooding, a natural disaster that has become more and more common around the world due to global warming. Although each dancer is in their own home, they are feeling the impacts of water levels rising as a community. Exploring gentle yet firm, curvy movements with their arms and torso, each dancer embodies their journey through the water. Everyone pauses. Linda reaches up and expands her chest slowly, bringing her hands together towards the camera and then pulling them in towards her chest. Kim wraps her arms around herself in a sharp embrace, representing the conflict many people recently faced in the south of Brazil during their most recent and record-breaking flood. Hundreds of thousands of people had to quickly make life or death decisions as to what to bring, who to help, how to help, and still get themselves to safe space as soon as possible, all while mourning and working through so much loss. Linda pauses. Kim keeps turning sharply, leading the movement from her elbows. Kim pauses. Cassandra and Demi begin moving. Cassandra bending knees deeply and moving towards the floor briskly, in contrast to Demi's slower and smoother start. Demi works through his torso, gently, slow, sways with quick accents, like kelp underwater, and brings arms down from his chest in a gesture of surrender. Cassandra brings hands to head and circles her torso in a moment of frustration, confusion, and loss. Shai begins their movement, taking breaths and seeking comfort in gentle arms while balancing, needing strength in those same arms to carry on. Cassandra and Demi pause, leaving Shai as the only dancer still moving in space. Isolation in times of crisis is far too common, even when thousands of people are going through similar struggles. Vanessa, a caramel-skinned dancer, props herself up with her walker named Pluto. Moving her arms in waves that slowly make their way down, Vanessa embodies the texture of the water that surrounded so many in the south of Brazil. Those waves gradually become firm pushes, as if trying to find a way out of the submersion. Kim, in a new space of her home, sits by the door frame and presses against it, exploring new ways to support herself and to create space for breath, something that seemed and was truly impossible for so many victims of the flood. Cassandra and Demi, also in new, more cornered spaces of their homes, try to find some comfort in the movement in this less than ideal confinement. Demi with soft sways starting with hands close to their heart, and Cassandra slowly crumbling to the floor. Linda and Shai reappear, also with a more restricted frame. Linda starts on the floor, curled into a ball, and expands arms and legs as if trying to push against water. Making her way up, she moves towards the wall as if pushed by a strong body of water. She grasps onto the wall, trying to find some stability, something to hold on to, even if that is just hope. Shai presses their surroundings in hopes of finding support in others. Without successfully finding a human connection, they continue to seek stability in their movements. All 6 dancers find themselves on the floor. Slowly opening one arm and then the other with resistance, they each find their way up, supporting themselves with surrounding walls, furniture, and in Vanessa's case, with Pluto. They manipulate body parts as they have to act as their own support in many circumstances. They break free from this pattern, opening their arms towards the camera and then scooping them up as if playing with the very water that could drown them. The scooping textures vary. The tone in the scooping also varies. Sometimes it's playful, sometimes heavy, as if trying to move what seems to be an infinite amount of water out of the way. Some scoops seem to be calling for the community and a gathering of the scarce resources. Considering how floods affect people with disabilities and can truly cause so many disabilities, many times there's a general feeling of surrender, especially in scenarios in which so much of what is happening is not under any one given person's control. Dancers continue to balance a call for support and the support they can offer themselves. One by one, each dancer's screen turns off. Slowly flooding back in, taking their new, wider spaces, dancers lean, tired of fighting against the water, fighting for change, fighting to survive. There's not a lot of resources for people during floods, especially for the disabled community. The visible and invisible disabilities are much harder to tend to when everything is underwater. Considering the Brazilian government hasn't made a lot of progress in preparing for floods in recurring locations such as the south of Brazil, there has clearly been no progress in supporting those in most need of resources. The solution is in community. Dancers realize, although far apart, they're in similar situations and can lean on each other. Stacking forearms as they rebuild all they've lost, they bring their hands to their faces and pull away, understanding their sorrows and their need to just keep going. They begin to push against surfaces in this new space, discovering what this relocation can offer and how to make the most out of it, diving headfirst into a new life they had no choice in. They take a moment to pause and digest. Shai begins moving sharply, bringing arms around their head. Demi then starts moving, arms in sharp angles, isolated from the rest of his body.
Vanessa then begins to move her arms in gentle and curvy lines with hopeful reaches up. Kim begins to move sharply with her arms, using her hand to take her opposite arm into a new shape and bringing one hand around her head repeatedly. Cassandra begins strongly leaning and pushing against the furniture. All these embodied textures representing the many impacts of this historic flooding, emotionally, physically, financially, politically, environmentally. Linda starts moving, pausing everyone else for a moment. Linda moves arms expansively with an open chest, bringing hope. Pushing arms through space, creating a supportive environment for her peers, she also brings delicacy into her expansiveness, reminding us all they can coexist. Everyone else begins to move again, as they're reminded of their power and their strength as individuals and even more as a community. Cassandra slowly starts making her way towards her camera. As her face gets closer and closer to the screen, all other dancers find pause in their movement. In moments of crisis, it's always important to find something to look forward to keep hope. Hope is a beautiful driving force for change.
Hello, my name is Kate. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a small white woman with short hair wearing a yellow floral shirt, and there is a cream wall behind me. I have been dancing with Abilities Dance Boston for a little bit over 2 years, and this is my first time choreographing a piece for the company. I am located currently on Massachusetts, Agawam, Pawtucket, Pennacook, and Wabanaki land, also known as Lowell, Massachusetts. This piece is about lineage and the inherited histories of disability, displacement, and place that exists in our bodies. As the BIPOC founded and led movements of disability justice and climate justice teach us, collective liberation is dependent on the liberation of our own selves, which is why I decided to put the main investigation of the piece inside the body. Big thank you to the dancers who collaborated in creating the movement and the audio descriptions for this piece, and a big thank you to Andrew, Elise, Erin, Lisbeth, and Amber for such a supportive process.
A grouping of 3 video screens. There is darkness inside them. The screens are arranged in a triangle shape. This dance is about lineage. It was created in collaboration with the dancers, Linda, Joshua, and Simon, to music by Erin Johnson. All 3 boxes have hands come away from the screen to reveal 3 people in different locations standing close to the camera, so just their torsos are shown. Hands are clasped. The hands slowly unclasp, then clasp again, then unclasp, then clasp again. The hands unclasp and clasp again, twice more, this time with a little bit more force. They are considering the elements of their lineages that have involved hands. Swiftly, hands release to form a straight line across their waists, one palm up and one palm down. The dancers rotate slowly, still close to the computer screen. During this rotation, they think about their feet sinking into the floor, into the ground under that, and back to the past, things that came before them that shape who they are today. Here we are today. They complete the rotation facing front. Lungs inhale, And exhale, as their hands and torso mimic their lungs, expanding outward then inward, tuning into what exists in their bodies because of what came before. Once more, they repeat this movement, remaining at the same steady tempo. Wrists and hands flex and spread and lead the arms into a long, muscular reach out to their sides as they back up. They pause with their hands clasped, considering. Linda and Simon repeat the phrase we just witnessed in unison, except with more speed and urgency as Josh starts collecting items around their room and draping them over their camera. Josh is wearing all mustard colors and has a background containing some clothes, a wall far away with some art on it, and a wooden structure to the side. A white netting, like a fishing net, is draped over one side of the camera, a familial connection to water. A clear plastic playing card, reminding them of their family who played cards at a low-cost game, is hung over the other side of the screen. Josh is in the middle of the two objects. Linda and Simon continue their phrase during this. Joshua starts moving in this obscured way, looking towards the back and then rolling their head and upper torso around to face the front again. They raise a hand out in front of them and pause there. Josh cups their hand around the bottom ridge of their shoulder, then the other one. Josh's arm releases into a stretch outward and around towards the camera, hand grasping around air. Linda and Simon stop and come towards us and cover their cameras. Darkness again in two boxes. Josh repeats cupping their shoulders and reaching their arm, grasping their hand 3 times, each time speeding up. Josh thinks about their family's history of disability and the tension between that history and their own disabilities. Both of their hands come to embrace the sides of their face. This is a very tender moment. Then they quickly release the hands and back away from us as their hands squat around their head and body. Feet plant, arms reach up, then collapse downward with a breath and a swing. They come back up and fluidly flap their arms once. They grasp at their torso, pulling something invisible to us but visible to them out of their body to hold on to. They pause and consider. Suddenly, they brush some of their limbs out in front and then back behind, back arching, face towards the top of the frame. Josh slowly comes close to the camera screen, hands coming up to grasp and hold the technology, and maybe also us. Hands come to their face again, holding. Hands are important in Josh's lineage. They back up, they pause, turn to the side, roll shoulders back 1, 2, and leave the frame. Simon appears as Joshua leaves their frame, so just the netting, cloth, and plastic playing card are left. Simon was wearing all purple clothing with a quilted flower on their sweater. Simon's background is a clean white wall. They start building their frame, which has sections of fuzzy white woven fabric. It is loosely strung together, making lines and circular holes. Simon can still be made out clearly in the center of the screen, framed by fabric, which looks like a fishing net. It reminds them of their hometown and the fishermen who were there. As they start moving, they wonder, who is caught? Observer or me? What is seen? Simon backs away, and one elbow comes up to curve gently to one shoulder, while the other arm drifts up to their side. The arms switch, one shoulder to the other, several times. Then one arm reaches around their waist as the other hand slides to their cheek, embracing their face to stay a moment, heavy and gentle. They tap both their hands to their knees, one after the other. Their torso comes down and up, arms overhead. They rotate erratically. Simon moves back. They think about breathing, how the town they grew up in has a very high asthma rate because of the oil rigs. They are floating, drifting like through water. Simon rapidly pulls invisible strings from their torso. They pause, turn, roll shoulder back 1, 2, then leave. Linda appears in a blue shirt with a watery pattern on it and starts putting material over her camera. Her background is mostly white with a bed, desk, and chair. The material is a reused Ziploc bag, shimmery material blurring and distorting her screen slightly. It reminds her of her childhood, how her family would wash Ziploc bags so they can be reused. Her hands come up to brush against each other, moving from side to side repeatedly, feeling the friction of palms sliding together. A wave of momentum takes her around to a spiral, one arm reaching up to the ceiling, then coming down in a flexed bicep. She brushes it with her hand. The other arm comes up through the center of her torso before she quickly circles around to the back. Linda bends both arms, one behind her head and one behind her back. She takes a breath. This shimmering bag frame also makes Linda think of plastic and using so much of it in all sorts of forms. She grew up in a place that's almost known for its pollution. Linda moves her hand to her cheek. The other hand joins in a cupped embrace. Linda holds herself while rotating. It surprises and fascinates her how plastic can create such beauty and yet such damage to our planet. She releases her arm outward and towards the camera, hand closing around air. Linda brings her arms up and down. Plastic is ubiquitous in our world, yet, at least to her, it's hard to identify as plastic just from first glance of this frame. Linda pauses, facing the side. She leans back on her heels, then falls forward to exit. For a moment, there are no people on screen, just Simon, Josh, and Linda's frames with objects, physical representations of the past. Suddenly, the dancers appear and quickly but intentionally undo their frames, bringing us and them into the present of their bodies now, informed by all that came before them, by the water with family traditions that whispered through generations and industrial conditions that harmed. All of this was passed on and informs us now. The dancers repeat the hand phrase they did at the beginning of the phrase, except at different speeds, and they're moving around in random areas of their spaces, back and forth, close and far, side to side. Hands coming apart and together, lungs expanding and contracting. We all come from a place, and we are all in a place right now. Places are not for power or corruption, they are for tending to. The ocean, the country, the cities. The dancers all back far away from the camera, then once again, together, come slowly toward us, hands reaching out to embrace the camera. We have all ended up where we are one way or another with these inherited histories, the movement of people, forced or deliberate. Untangling the histories and destroying the forces that created harm inside helps to nourish place, present and future, the place of our bodies and physical space. The dance ends with Simon, Josh, and Linda reaching up to cover their cameras with their hands, which were already close to us.
Hello, my name is Dara Capley. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with long dark hair and eyes that crinkle a lot when I smile. I'm currently sitting on my couch in Somerville, Massachusetts, former homeland to the Pawtucket people. This is my third year dancing with abilities and my second time choreographing. The piece I'm presenting today is titled Through the Ice, and it draws parallels between the effects climate change is having on beluga whales and the difficulties and inaccessibility that disabled folks can often experience during a climate disaster. Beluga whales can hold their breath for 20 minutes and often swim under thick slabs of ice. The ice is melting and reforming at a rate that they're no longer able to predict, and their echolocation is kind of getting a little messed up. So they're getting trapped under the ice and drowning, which is heartbreaking. Similarly, disabled folks can be trapped in so many different ways when an emergency occurs, whether that is elevators being turned off during a fire evacuation, an emergency responder not having ASL training. What else? There's honestly, the list goes on and on. There are emergency shelters that are entirely inaccessible to a lot of folks, and just many, many different ways. And many different ways that a disabled person actively has to advocate for themselves in an emergency when they should be able to rely on their community and the people that have been trained to respond in an emergency. This unfair emotional load is so heavy. Going into an emergency or having an emergency suddenly strike and knowing that your identity could be possibly fatally undervalued is one that feels terrifying, to be honest, and just such a load. So I chose this because I think that the feeling of being trapped is one that we all kind of relate to, and we can all tap into that feeling of being trapped and being unable to get yourself out of it. And similarly, the desire to get yourself out of this trap, I think we all relate to. I think as humans, we really like to think of ourselves as separate from nature. And that's such a fallacy. We are so connected to nature and our environments and each other. So to me, when our environments and infrastructure, fail even one member of our communities, the ripples outward affect all of us. And I also just don't want to live in a society that fails any member of my community. And to me, that is a disabled friend in a fire that needs help down the stairs, and these whales that are drowning and having huge impacts on other sea life. So I think that this intersectional thinking about these issues is actually incredibly vital to change making. I think that it is what will save us when we learn to embrace that we are our environments, we are our community, and without them, we will fail. I'd love to thank my dancers, Shai, Joshua, and Kim. They've been incredibly generous with their effort and involvement, both physically and emotionally. I want to thank Erin Rogers for this incredible score with lots of whale sounds that I love. Amber Pearcy and Elise Patterson for their guidance on audio descriptions. I still have so much to learn, but it has been a wonderful process learning, and I'm so grateful. Elise has also provided a lot of guidance during this process and a book recommendation. Just having regular chats was just so supportive and helpful. So thank you, Elise. I'd actually like to close with a quote from this book. The book is called Building Power While the Lights Are Out: Disasters, Mutual Aid, and Dual Power. It's edited by Jimmy Dunson. And the small quote I'm going to read is words of his. He is speaking specifically about after a climate disaster occurs. The grid is often down, but we don't lack power. We find untapped power within ourselves, with each other, and working with the rhythms of nature. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and please enjoy.
Joshua, Shai, and Kim stand separately in their homes, with our view being slightly from above, as if through a skylight or clear slab of ice. They fold forward in unison, arms to the side, imagining they are holding up a physical wall above them and an unseen emotional weight. They pull this weight around them like a suffocating blanket. Wrestling in the cage of their arms, they burst out to turn front, duck under their arms. The right hand grips throats and rips breath to their side in fists, just like a power outage can rip autonomy away from someone. They watch the breaths travel upwards, then oppression sharply drops them down, with one hand raised as if holding up a roof. Pulling the oppression down, tension builds and bursts. They pull their chest to the sky like whales searching for breath through cracks in the ice. They drop and turn, arms carve through space, searching for support, the way rescuers search for signs of life. Reaching up, feeling the ice above them, arms curve before fingers curl into fists, attempting to rip through their situational trappings. They spin with one arm reaching up, spin resolves, and hands roughly wipe down their faces. Folding forward with arms at their sides, again holding imaginary weight above them. Arms travel in front of their faces with splayed hands. Hands wave like seaweed as the dancers take a communal breath, reminding themselves and us that they move together, even miles apart. Twisting with arms raised, they slowly turn as hand circles and comes to their mouths. Hands mime pulling something out of their open mouths, maybe songs of connection, maybe cries for help from the 5th floor of a burning building where the elevator has been turned off. Heads roll, and they take a heavy step away from us, wiping the back. They face front, and hands mime, touching a wall. Hands make strong fists before waving the arms. They press down to rise, as if through a crack in the ice. They rotate, exploring, then press fingertips forward and push bodies away before curling and turning. They collapse briefly in different directions. Dancers pick up one leg and the opposite arm as they twirl to face front on the diamond. Hands urgently come to chest and stomach, mouths drop open. Hand comes to chin to close the mouth. Bodies sharply fold before a wave ripples down the body. Dancers dive into a body roll. They pull to stand with one shoulder uncomfortably raised as they turn. Lunging, then twirling, arms wrap around them. Hands come up to frame dancers' mouths. Hands rotate palms outward, mouths open, gaping like a fish out of water. Mouths gently close as they dig through rubble in front of them, slowly bending over. Hands scoop, pulling air to the dancers' chests before releasing heavily. Dancers swim back for 2 steps. Hands touch chests. Dancers breathe communally again. The emotional weight of navigating their surroundings weighs them down into a crouch. Spiraling, they push through the air to cradle their faces in one hand with the other wrapped around their waists in a moment of self-care. They pulse up like a beacon before resting again. Stepping back with hands diving down, they squat. Right hand hits the air twice. Dancers step back, reaching for the community care that feels so out of reach. Shai and Kim begin to explore their surroundings, testing the limits of their environments. Joshua reaches up and down, hands meet pulling elevator doors closed in front of them. Hands go to back of neck, then curve. Hands clasp behind us, they undulate, then twirl to rest back on the wall. They rotate, touching the wall, reaching to us, then away. Hands press on the wall and then quickly pull away to reach up, releasing. With a big exhale, they join the others in exploration. Kim deeply and suddenly squats, then pulls up until she's in a tight and comfortable position that does not suit her. She steps away, looking at her past self. Hand grabs chin, she twirls, dropping down, one hand above. She lays down, hand touches chest. Without the breath of her community to guide her, she begins breathing faster and bigger, before breaking herself out of this pattern she does not belong in, and again observes her past self. Kim and Joshua reunite in exploration. Shy rounds their back and arms, grabbing the situation they're in and ripping themselves out of it. Shy's hand twitches and drops to draw a line up their center, stopping with a fist in front of their face in righteous anger. Hands join as Shy extends one leg behind them, forming a long line. Gathering in their power, they extend limbs in many directions, sending out mutual aid, all on one leg. Stepping forward, they twist, arms bend to frame their face with their forearms. Joshua and Kim join Shy in this shape. All fold forward. They walk in a slow circle, carrying invisible but heavy emotional weight. Arms travel to front of faces as they stand. Hands press together as they step forward with broad chests, feeling the spray of the sea. Curling in and rotating before dropping sideways, they turn and stand as hands come to frame mouths. Fingers dig into rubble, hands come to chest and belly. They fall forward, cradling themselves. Rising, they look at their hands, remembering how much power we have to enact change. They fall into a soft squat, hands come to the mouth to pull out songs and plans for mutual aid as they turn. Hands come behind backs, pulling weight off of themselves, then hands meet in front of faces. Hand comes to throat, it pulls the breath away in a fist one more time. Hands release, and they watch the breath travel. They do not get pushed down this time. They rise. They know where oxygen is found. It's with one another.
Hi, my name is Lauren. I've been a dancer with abilities since 2017, and I'm really excited to share this piece that I've choreographed in collaboration with the dancers, Demi, Linda, and Vanessa. This piece was inspired about thinking about the impact climate crisis has on reproductive choices, especially during a time when there has been an attack on reproductive rights, including the repealing of Roe v. Wade. And really thinking about it with a lens of reproductive choices as bodily autonomy, and what that looks like also as a disability justice issue. With this piece, I really wanted it to be collaborative with the dancers since the topic is very relevant to what we're all experiencing right now. I really wanted the movement to not just come from my own perspective, but my dancers' perspective too. So in order to create movement for this piece, I started off by having 3 questions that I wanted all the dancers and myself to reflect on, which were: 1, what is the emotional toll in deciding what you want for your future in a state of climate dread? 2, what does it mean when access to reproductive freedom is currently being threatened as the climate crisis continues? And then finally, what does bodily autonomy from a disability, climate, and reproductive justice lens mean to you? And then from this, the dancers and myself reflected on these questions, and we found common themes that emerged in our reflection. And then we consolidated those themes, which included things that were feelings as well too, within our reflection, like the feeling of fear or grief or unfairness, and tried to reflect that in the movement as well. So we created those themes, broken down into 3 chunks based on the 3 questions, and then went each rehearsal through 1 or 2 themes to directly create movement in response to that theme. So for instance, one of the first themes in the piece is it is a privilege to be able to make decisions around family planning. And so we would all take some time individually to reflect on what that looks like in movement for each of us, and then come together and take pieces of each of our own movement that we created in order to create some movement phrases that then became the choreography. And later on in the piece too, there were very individual moments too that highlight directly each dancer's phrases that they came up with into solos or into duets. So that comes up later in the piece as well. So I really wanted this to be a personal experience, and so now I'd love for you to hear from the dancers as well.
Vanessa, Demi, Linda, and Lauren stand in their individual Zoom screens wearing different shades of green and black. They start by grasping at their stomachs, reflecting on the privilege it is to be able to make decisions regarding family planning. Their right arms push up towards the ceiling with tension, and then they turn 180 degrees looking at their left hand in contemplation. Both arms stretch out forward and then open dramatically. Their hands then come to their head as they feel the heaviness. Hugging themselves to provide comfort, their bodies slowly rotate. They apply pressure to their stomach with their hands and then soothingly rub their stomach in a circle before making a larger circle around themselves. They repeat this faster. They take steps in place, reach up, and sharply cross their arms, hitting at the elbows. They apply pressure to their stomach again and turn around themselves to all end in different positions at different height levels. Both arms stretch forward again, but this time they take time to wiggle their fingers before opening their arms dramatically. They take a quiet moment to grasp at their stomachs before lowering down, reflecting on the dissonance that can occur in navigating oppression differently. They rotate the palms of their hands before they come to their foreheads, as if pulling apart their skin and flicking it away. Their arms swim to both sides, their hand cradles their forehead, and they flick their arms again. They stand, and their fingers interlace at their chests before moving to their mouths and breaking apart. They walk in a circle around themselves before bending at the knees, shaking their heads, and standing straight up strongly. They make a large circle with their arms and then push towards the audience real close. They come back to themselves, offering themselves comfort with a hug until their arms push down their sides. They take a moment to grasp at their stomachs again, and then pulling away, they move around their spaces, pushing away at the dissonance. Stuck in feelings of grief at the unfairness, they individually melt into poses as statues, holding on to these feelings for quite some time. After, they walk around themselves again before bending at the knees. In different times, they loosely and heavily take low steps before hitting their arms up sharply. Coming together again, they bend forward and stare intensely at the camera, knowing that threatening access to reproductive choices during a climate crisis is a crime. They release their stare and sharply, with increasing momentum, circle their right arms and hit their elbows up in anger before using the momentum to turn and lunge forward. Increasing anger builds and they punch both hands, feeling it in the gut. They lunge back and clasp their hands together before reaching them up into their stomachs. They push out before repeatedly grasping at the audience, getting closer to the camera. They curl their fingers, taking time to examine them before bringing them up to their hearts. Their wrists stuck together and rotate, reaching out, finally pulling them apart and up. They take a quiet moment to come back to their feelings of the unfairness of it all. They glance back twice and spin their arm, getting faster and faster until they let go, flicking their arm forward. They sway and rotate their shoulders, recognizing the intentional exploitation in this control. Tightly, they grab at their stomachs and fall backwards as they let go. Their arms reach out as wide as they can before their hands come to their faces and they slowly turn. They know the systems are working just as they were designed. Their hands push towards the camera before returning to their faces, and their fingers walk down to their stomach. They take a deep breath in. Holding their breath, they bend at the knees before shaking, trying to get free, but their feet are stuck to the ground. They step over themselves, and their arms come sharply around the neck. Their upper bodies fall loosely with their arms bound behind their backs. They turn to the back, strongly pushing their arms to the right. They turn again, facing forward to push against. They repeat, going in all different directions and intersecting layers, holding on to the unfairness. They pause all the chaos, falling one at a time into visual representations of the inequity and who utilizes resources and who is most impacted by this crisis. Feeling this grief, they take time individually to reflect on the impact changing relationships to land could have on this crisis. Linda starts repeatedly moving forward and back, and then swinging her arms until they slowly melt down. Demi moves next, with their hands brushing to their side and then up. Their fingers wiggle down until they reach their heart and flutter. Lauren follows, rapidly swinging her arms and then slowly dragging her right arm horizontally before rubbing at her stomach. Then, Vanessa continues swiveling her hands and then opening her arms out. Next, she swivels her entire arms to each side before ending reaching out. Demi and Vanessa move in a duet, hands coming to their hearts and then reaching out. Their hands come to their faces in grief over who is left behind during times of violence. With fingers outstretched, their hands fall and rise, and then rotate 180 degrees as they swipe their faces with their hands. Lauren and Linda move next, bicycling their legs and then pushing against the wall as they think about the connection between power, gender, and exploitation. In a fist, their hands come to their heart, flutter, and move to their stomach. They end strongly with hands and fists at their sides. They pause, and Demi and Vanessa continue. Sitting close to the camera, their hands come to their mouth and then punch at the sky, knowing having choices is not enough. Their hands jab 3 times, filling their individual Zoom screens, and then float towards themselves. They place each hand gently and then glide them into themselves. They roll their bodies and arms and then end with arms outstretched. Lauren and Linda repeat this phrase, standing with their full bodies filling their Zoom screens. They recognize reproductive choices and bodily autonomy needs to be accessible, not just available. One at a time, the dancers move individually in short movement phrases, reflecting on the importance of intersectionality within reproductive justice. Vanessa starts and then pushes towards the camera, passing along to Lauren, then Demi, and finally Linda. They move in unison again, pushing against power, greed, and control, and grasping towards community. They sharply hit their elbows up, look up, and touch their faces. Their hands slide away to hug themselves before releasing in a circle. They slowly sway back and forth until the music concludes.
This is Elise Patterson speaking. Thank you again for watching our 2024 Branches performance. Immense gratitude to the artistic team that put this into place. We hope you continue supporting our work with our next performance, Tales from the Crypts. Reimagining fairy tales with the disabled ones. Premiering live from the Strand Theater and live streamed November 8th and 9th, 2024. You can register for tickets at ticketstripe.com/adbtales. Don't hesitate to reach out to abilitiesdanceboston@gmail.com for more information on how you can support or get involved. We thank you for your continued support. Until next time.